the administration seems to be relying very heavily on sanctions, as well as very belated arms deliveries to Ukraine. But what I'm concerned about is that Ukrainian resistance cannot really last that much longer. There's a general assumption, I think the media have encouraged this, that the Ukrainians can hold out and that the Russians have stalled. But that's not right. If you follow what's happening, the Russians have been advancing steadily. They've sustained heavy casualties, heavier than they expected. But I think the assumption that this is going to drag out, that the United States can sit back and watch the economic sanctions do their work may be gravely mistaken. And what I fear lies ahead are days of continued destruction of Ukrainian cities, with a distinct risk that Russia will advance further and begin to break down Ukraine's heroic defenders. I can't understand where the administration is diplomatically. They seem to be leaving it to others. And not surprisingly, if the US doesn't have any diplomatic strategy, it's unlikely that the Russians and Ukrainians are going to sit down and negotiate in earnest, as we saw, of course, in Turkey just a few hours ago.
Indeed, yeah, I understand what you're saying. The Ukraine simply does not have time to wait for sanctions to really bite, and what is really needed now to beat the clock would be significant military assistance. I mean, we've seen evidence of that already. Would you go so far to say that what the U.S. and, for that matter, NATO needs to do is to get off the pot and put boots on the ground in Ukraine?
No, I don't think that. I mean, it's extremely important not to make the mistake of escalating into a full-blown war between NATO and Russia. That would be extraordinarily risky, especially given that Vladimir Putin has already threatened the use of nuclear weapons. But I don't think that's necessary as long as we can make sure that Ukraine's defenses don't crumble. And here we're really racing against the clock, because in the last couple of years, there really hasn't been sufficient supply of weapons to Ukraine to make it able to defend itself without outside assistance. Remember, we said to them in principle, you can join NATO. It just turned out to be that was going to be never. And if you say to someone you can join NATO but never, you leave them terribly vulnerable, because in the end, they're not going to have NATO to defend them. They're going to have to rely on their own resources. And we really did slow down the arms deliveries to Ukraine. Now we're scrambling with a frantic effort to keep them in this fight. But I'm not sure that effort's going to succeed. I really fear that there's a race on here between Russia's advancing and clearly superior military forces and the sanctions, which are certainly crippling the Russian economy, as Janet Yellen said, but not altogether, because, of course, the Europeans continue to buy oil from Russia and haven't yet made the decision to impose an oil ban, which might possibly finish off the economic pressure. So I think in this race, there's no guarantee that Ukraine holds out. And what I dread is steadily worse news from Ukraine and the breakdown of Ukraine's defences. And we'll sit there saying, oh, well, the sanctions have really hurt Russia, but it won't matter to Putin because he'll be able to claim victory. That, for me, is the nightmare scenario.